It's fantastic to be here. I love coming to Iceland. I feel as though it's a very, very special place. And it's wonderful to see an auditorium so full of people who are interested in babies and their families. Very, very heartening. No doubt, partly, if not largely, to do with the work of Anna Maria and Sion and Helga and Stefania, who have persevered in saying babies matter. So I want to tell you where I come from in my presentation today. If you hold in mind Graham's last video of Jordan and his granddad, and you come to the point where Jordan turns away, as though he's saying to Granddad, this has been such great fun, but now I'm too stimulated, now it's all too much to me, I have to disconnect gaze contact with you, which is so arousing, and just be by myself for a little bit and calm down. And what Granddad says in his mind, in his behavior, not consciously, is, okay, Jordan, I understand, that's fine. I'm not going to feel rejected. I'm not going to feel I have to chase you to get you back to me. We'll take this little space, and then when you're ready, we'll come back together. That's emotional regulation. That's translation of concepts into tiny little interactions that don't pass through our consciousness. It's not as though Granddad's saying to himself, now, I must consider the emotional regulation of this infant who's only 3 days old, if I'm not mistaken, etc., etc. Granddad is doing this out of conscious, intuitively. Something is in Granddad's psyche that says, yeah, we all take time out. That's how we regulate ourselves. This is what little Jordan is doing, and so on and so forth. So this is where I'm coming from. Now, in our consulting rooms, we see babies and parents who don't manage that ordinary interaction in a way that is emotionally regulating to the baby. And these babies that we see are full of what the National Scientific Council of the Developing Child at Harvard calls toxic stress, overwhelming stress that is not modulated, is not buffered by the adult. In fact, the adult intensifies the stress instead of acting as the buffer. So in the consulting room, what do? How do we help these adults? Consulting room, I mean any room, yeah? It's whether you're a midwife or a health visitor or a social services assessor of whether the child can stay with the parent or not. What do we do to see whether we can help with emotional regulation here? And one of the things I was trying to understand is, how do I really get into the experience of the baby? How can I get really in touch with the experience of the baby, who's not mine? Yeah, it doesn't come. I have to, and whose parent is not managing what they normally, if things were different, would be able to do. There is work on this. This is not, I'm not trying to say that we at the Anna Freud Center were spearheading this, but this is, and so my presentation today, what I'm trying to keep in mind all the time is the voice of the baby. Because babies don't speak, we can only surmise that we understand them. So there's a measure of humility here. But also, if we don't shout out what we think the baby is experiencing, people tend not to hear it. People tend to gravitate to the voice of the adult. I think Graham said that very clearly. And we have to be the people who read what the baby is saying through their behavior and try and translate it into states of mind that adults can understand. So that's where I'm coming from. And one of the things that is really preoccupying lots of people is the whole question of disorganized attachment in infants, which is so predictive of an adverse developmental trajectory for that individual, which is the subject of Graham's lecture today. And I want to get inside that situation and invite you to join me in the consulting room. So I will be bringing clinical material. Please be very respectful, although this takes place in England, with the permission of this very generous mother to use her material. Names are mentioned in the video. We don't extract that, and please be very respectful of that if you want to discuss this later on. Forget the names, forget the identity. Okay. Does one press? Yeah. From the perspective of the child, relational trauma refers to the child is completely porous to the caretaking activities of the parent. The parents are their total relational environment. In fact, they're their total environment. The child's expectation is of safety, nurturing, trust. We need that to survive. Relational trauma refers to the violation of safety and trust imposed from the child's perspective by the parent. And these occur in the ordinary interactions between infant and parent, and they occur out of consciousness. So that's not to say that parents come and willfully do things that might adversely impact their children. It's very important that we remember that the parents themselves are often just telling us, via their interactions with their baby, their own personal story. So we'll come back to that. In situations of relational trauma, what the infant, we surmise, experiences is that the parent upon whom they depend for psychic survival is the source of threat to their psychic integrity. And it creates an irresolvable paradox for them. This is the words of Mary Main and Eric Hesse, where the person they need is the person who is the source of threat. And what do they do with this? They can't really do very much with this. And as psychoanalysts often err on the side of poetry, people like Winnicott and Bion have tried to capture this experience of the child in terms like catastrophic anxiety and unthinkable anxiety as the experiences of the child. But as I said, what we're also hearing in situations of relational trauma is the story of the parent themselves, often the subject of relational trauma in their own childhood. And a rather brash and reductionist story in attachment theory is that the parent, or the person who is now a parent, when they were a child, suffered relational trauma in their relationship with their parents or caregivers, which, in the absence of someone to help them process this, remains as a lump of unresolved trauma, psychological material, embodied memories. When they themselves become parents, sometimes the trajectory is that that trauma accompanies them throughout their development. Sometimes the story is that they manage that trauma until they themselves become parents. And when they become parents, the baby then concretely represents themselves as infants and evokes in them all the conflicts around dependency, vulnerability, lack of ability to survive on their own. What Mary Main suggests is that unresolved material floods the parent as a result of some sort of trigger. It might be in the baby, it might be the baby's crying, for example. And the parent enters an altered state of mind. which results in, which is characterized by fear and results in anomalous behaviors in the parent. And these are brief, they pass very quickly. I'll show you this on video. Yeah? It's not that the parent is constantly showing frightening or frightened behaviors, but they come in unexpectedly, out of context. And it's this that is frightening to the baby, the state of mind of the parent that is expressed in these anomalous behaviors. And unless these can be processed by someone for the baby, with the baby, they in turn will become lumps of embodied memory in the next generation as they become parents. This is a very simplistic presentation of complex ideas. So that's one part of what I wanted to introduce. The second part is the whole field of, well, how does it show to the naked eye these anomalous behaviors? What would we see? And Daniel Stern and Beatrice Beebe and Frank Lachman are people who spearheaded a method of research that videos behavior and breaks it down frame by frame, and then microanalyzes the behavior in milliseconds. And that's what I'm going to show you. It's been used to understand parent-infant relationships. The work is mind-blowing. I don't know if you know the work of Beatrice Beebe, but if you don't, it's really worth studying. And do come to London next year in May, because Beatrice is coming. I'll save you a place. Register quickly. It's going to sell out, I think, very quickly. At 4 months, in microanalytic research, you can predict disorganized attachment. It's really mind-blowing. And microanalysis is so important because it captures what we can't see with the naked eye, because it happens so quickly, and that's why we can't be conscious of it either. It's just comes into our body, and that's where it resides. Okay, so my question was, can microanalysis help us in the consulting room to see what happens, how relational trauma is played out in the consulting room, and how we as mental health practitioners can work with it? Yeah? So that's the second bit of my talk today, and I'm going to try and bring them together in the videos. Just a word about expectancies. Again, Beatrice summarizes work with Frank Lachman and others to show how relationships are co-constructed, that we're constantly adapting to the other. It's not a boom, 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 boom process. It's much quicker than that. I'm anticipating how you're going to react before you've finished your reaction, and you're already formulating your reaction to me before I've even completed my sequence. Yeah? That, as Graham was illustrating, you can predict the other person's behaviors from their partners in the back and forth. And over time, Graham says, with one incident, one interactional event, it creates expectancies of behavior. Yeah? So little Jordan is going to expect his granddad to stop smiling at him and arousing him even more when he needs to calm down. That's going to be how he thinks granddad and he are going to be. At 2.5 months, an infant can generate expectancies based on this familiarity and repetition. If granddad is pretty consistent, or if he interactively repairs his mismatch with the baby if he misses it, then the baby's going to have an expectancy that granddad's going to be like that, and that's going to be his internal working model. Okay, so using all this information and psychoanalytic theory about unconscious processes and attachment research and so on, we developed a model of parent-infant psychotherapy. I should say we're still developing because it changes all the time as we learn more. And one of the things we've learned a lot more about now is fathers. So a lot of our focus now is on working with fathers and with the family as a system rather than the mother-infant relationship only. I'm going to show you a video to illustrate a bit of work, how it looks in the room, and to give you a feeling of how it feels to be in the room, and then we'll do the microanalytic bit. But essentially, because you won't get this all in one short clip, what we're trying to do is work with the things that get in the way, the states of mind in the parent that get in the way of their parenting behaviors, those growth-promoting parenting behaviors, and to increase their sensitivity and reflective functioning. I presume those are terms known to you? Yeah? And with the infant, and we work directly with the baby, and you'll see that, it's to address emotional dysregulation and their defenses, or what Graham presented as adaptations, early adaptations, but they are defending against adverse experiences that come in from the environment in order to keep the range of attachment behaviors open and fluid. Okay, so let me show you. This is the second session. It's just to give you an illustration to bring you into the room with me as a practitioner. This mother, age 23, had zillions of ACEs. She was a very high-risk woman. She came from an abusive family, had to do a lot of tending to herself. We did the AAI. It was full of trauma. But she also had a long period of therapy, which she had found very helpful, and she had a very stable relationship with a man who came from a very stable, warm family that embraced her. So she had a very corrective experience to work through the trauma. And then she got to the point where she felt ready to have a child. Unfortunately, the birth was very traumatic, and the baby nearly died during the birth. And it was always a question in my mind, had the birth been straightforward and not re-evoked memories of loss and fear and so on, would she have needed parent-infant psychotherapy? Maybe not. Maybe she did enough work and was really ready. But this very unfortunate birth came on top of old trauma, and there was an interplay. Okay, the referral came because the baby was very avoidant with everybody. In this session, the baby's 9 weeks old. Somehow, I should be able to make it play.
I can't think, because real quick. It's, I found my songs coming out, I realised how much I needed to talk, because it's like really easy. Laura didn't have to say, but she's all okay now. I say it's been quite good. But,
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
I can't think, because real quick. It's, I found my songs coming out, I realised how much I needed to talk, because it's like really easy. Laura didn't have to say, but she's all okay now. I I went through 2 days of trying to get to sleep, not in my arms, just in the day, which was just a nightmare. I know, there were actually some so many. So we had 2 not very nice days. We had 1 very good day when my mum was there as well, she was really lovely, and then 2 grumpy days. Exhausting days of me just taking her out, putting her in, taking her out, putting her in. She didn't sleep, so she didn't sleep all day. Then today's a bit nice.
So taking her out of most responsibility?
Yeah. She doesn't manage. That's all.
Tell us about that. Is it that you like mommy skin and the smell and the softness? Or is it that the most responsibility would like to be by yourself and incubate?
Yeah, she stayed with maybe 10 minutes. She must have been exhausted, and with me singing to her, that seemed to help. But that did not, and that only works. But really, even if I put my hand on her, it doesn't start at all. She needs me completely to pick her up. And at the very end of the day, she said to me out that was because she's not slept the whole day. And then I just gave up because I thought she was wearing that in a month or something. Because she seems so unhappy after all day. So if I tried in the morning, 6 hours later, she'd still seem unhappy. I don't know if that's possible.
Sounds like a long memory.
Exactly. Can she remember that? I don't know if it's just me putting. Maybe she had been grumpy that day anyway.
But you know, I think we really don't know the residue in her body. Not in a mental level, in her body kind of feeling of comfort of that early period.
That's true.
Yeah. There might be something that just doesn't feel safe.
Yeah.
Doesn't feel right for your teeny self. I might also be attributing things. I don't know.
Yeah, and I was saying to my mum, maybe she would always have been a kind of baby that just likes to be put down. Never. Maybe just not say what it was.
Maybe not, but maybe we can, what we need to do is over time, not, from one day to the next, help you think of ways how to help her settle.
Yes, that would be amazing, because it's a bit ridiculous. I don't really mind talking now all day. It's a bit dysfunctional.
So, I could talk about this for hours, just this clip, the signs of trauma in it. How do we know that there's already trauma there, say in the presentation of the baby? What do those grunts and that unsettledness in the baby's body tell us about her internal experience and so on? But, oh, yes, and can you bring me back to the slides, please? To the PowerPoint. Okay. But I'm going to move on. It's on the surface of things, it's a very ordinary story, isn't it? Is it the mother? Is it a baby who's been sensitized by a traumatic birth? Does the baby carry within herself an experience of trauma from that birth? What is the mother transmitting to her? Can you imagine you nearly lose your baby at birth? The anxiety that must have come out of the professionals and the parents towards the baby as the adult world both saved her, gave her life, but also gave her a lot of pain with all the intrusions and so on. So is it a sensitive baby? Is it an environment of anxiety that was created? Is it temperamental stuff, like the mother says? She might have been the kind of grumpy baby anyway. How do we know? Yeah? Okay, so how do we know, and how do we know what we have to address? I'm going to show you. So we are doing a bit of research now at the Anna Freud Center. We got money from the International Psychoanalytic Association and from the American Psychoanalytic Association, to expand a pilot project that we started at the Anna Freud Center. If you have any interest, you pursue it voluntarily. Nobody pays you for your time. Then if you raise money for it, then it's recognized. So we started this pilot project, a small group of us, looking at sessions in a microanalytic way and applying standardized measures, of which I will show you, talk to you about. And I've got till 22? Okay. And the therapist's narrative, because as Graham mentioned, what the therapist experiences is can give us a lot of information about what's going on and maybe give us some explanations of things. So this is the same mother and baby. I'm going to play it in real time. Okay, so what's the narrative here? We're trying to slow down things. Do you remember Graham's fast, slow pace? I thought this environment, previous environment, needs slowing down. Anxiety, intrusions, a symptom of avoidance. Yeah, we need to slow things down and give it meaning. So I've come in to the session, and we already have a pace here, you can see. Mum introduces baby to the room, we wait, even my taking, and I'm completely unconscious of this, but my taking off of my shoes is slow and prolonged, yeah? And then I say to the baby, we've learned to wait. Mum and I, as a parenting couple with you in the room, we've learned to follow your rhythm and wait. Because, I'm saying to her, you are a baby who needs to take time. And when you're ready, you will tell us by looking at us, is what I'm saying to her. So avoidance then becomes an act of meaning and not only a symptom, which it was previously as a referral symptom. That interaction is quite powerful, and at some point, in my understanding, the baby does a Jordan. She turns away, yeah? At that point, Mum breaks into laughter, which is quite high and shrill, and not quite understood by me in that context. So, and baby's continuing to look out of the window. And I glance at mother. What's going on here? I'm not quite with you. And then it stops. So we looked at it from a microanalytic point of view, by breaking it down and selecting the main frames. I'm going to... Is that what I've got now? This is the disrupted event, yeah, when the baby looks away. So I'm going to just play it again in real time. Oh, no, I'm already on the microanalytic. Okay, so let me, how'd you go back to the slide? Sorry, just before. We applied oh, okay.
You want to go back?
Yeah, I want to go back for a moment.
That's the real time. Do you want to go further back?
I want to go back to the slides.
Escape.
Escape. And then to go back to this, will I go back?
Ödena.
Okay. I'm going to, look, I'm getting pressurized, so I'm going to
It's okay. So
do the Graham stuff and just, that's fine, it's fine, I can do it. Okay. I'm going to talk you through, without showing the slide, of two measures we've applied. One is called the ambience. It's atypical maternal behaviors instrument for assessment and classification, developed by Colin Lyons Ruth at Harvard. And what this has done is identified maternal behaviors that are associated with disorganization in the infant. And there's a list of behaviors in the mother, building on Mary Main and Eric Hess's frightening scale. Are you familiar with that? Behaviors in the parent that are frightening to the baby. That was the original scale. Colin Lyons Ruth extended this to other states of mind in the parent and anomalous behaviors that are frightening or disorganizing to the baby. So we applied that scale here to see if we could identify any parental behaviors that might be disorganizing for little baby. We also looked at reflective functioning in the parent, because there's a relationship between reflective functioning. That's the capacity to imagine states of mind in the other person as the reason for their behavior. So behaviors have meaning rather than being arbitrary. We also applied the reflective functioning scale. We did a narrative analysis where someone took the narrative of the session and analyzed that, and we did the therapist's clinical notes. We took the therapist's clinical notes. I'm going to show you the microanalysis and the application of all those three. So, here we are. Okay. Olive is looking, sorry, that's the name. The baby's looking at me, yeah? She's engaged. We're looking at each other. Part of our funding is going to buy more cameras. So you just have to infer that my face is full of expression. My eyebrows are up. I'm really interested. I'm looking at her intently. I really want to engage this baby, and I think my face and my body, you see I'm leaning forward, but in a slightly curved way, which those who do parental embodied mentalizing coding, because we did that too, have described as coming at a softened angle to the baby versus coming, whoop. You come at a softened angle that is less threatening to the baby. Now, all this is outside my consciousness, yeah? But that's the communication to the baby, and it will be highly engaging of the baby. Yeah? She will be responding to the adult interest and curiosity, but it's also arousing. So here the baby is looking at me, and mother's becoming more engaged, yeah? If you look, mother's head and my heads are coordinated, also out of consciousness entirely. Both of us are working together in relation to this baby. Yeah? And then see what happens. We're continuing to work together, mother and I, in the next step. And then see what happens. Baby has looked away. Both of us are rising a bit. Now, this is where mother's laugh starts. Can you see her mouth? Again, you have to infer. Her mouth is starting with that shrill laugh, yeah? And she's looking to me as though to engage me in this laugh. But look at her body. It's moving away from me, yeah? There's a double communication here. Tessa, I'm sharing this with you, is what it sounded like to me. But I'm also recoiling from you. Something not good is happening there. And I am very bemused. I've got this inane kind of look on my face, a smile which is supposed to be, friendly towards her, I think, a kind of appeasing smile, but it's a very dumb smile. It's not an expression of any emotional sharing with her. It's a kind of, what? What's happening here? You've lost me? Yeah? And I glance at her and at the baby, and mother's coming back to a more organized position, yeah? And I'm looking at her again, yeah? I'm still lost. And baby's gazing away at the mirror, and we end, yeah? Now what's in the analysis, the ambience analysis, there are 3 behaviors in the mother that are coded as frightening. 1 minute. 3 behaviors that are, the laugh comes out of nowhere. Yeah, it's a very non-mentalizing laugh as well, if we think of reflective functioning there. It's a sudden change of affect, very ghostly. That's one ambience coding. The second is laughing but moving away from me. That's a communication error, a double message. And the third is that mother taps the baby's head and says, "Oh dear." And it's not clear. Who's she talking to? What's the oh dear about? It's in a kind of disoriented, haunted voice, which again is communication error, is a very non-mentalizing stance. In parallel, I'm learning what I have to do tomorrow, and that's be shorter at the beginning and longer here. In parallel, what I'm feeling, this is a therapist's narrative, is what's going on here? I was having a communication with the baby. I felt Mum and I were doing this together. Yeah, we were threesome. And baby said, okay, I have to self-regulate, yeah? And then I'm thinking, fine, self-regulate. My body's soft, I'm open, a bit like granddad. It's fine. You'll come back to me when you're ready. But Mum cuts across with this laughter. So my expectancy is completely disrupted by this behavior of Mum's. Okay? We've done the coding. 3 minutes? I'm finished. From this, we're still working on this method. We don't quite know how to put it together. Beatrice puts all her data together and does a statistical analysis. We have no idea what we're going to do with these different methodologies, but it seems a promising way of integrating different approaches to try and understand what happens in trauma from the baby's perspective, to learn from the therapist's perspective, to understand about the baby. And one of my theories is that what happens in the trauma is such a violation of expectancies, yeah, that you don't know what to do. That's based on my experience. And I'm wondering whether therapeutic action lies in changing expectancies, yeah, which would confirm I hate to say this, but I'm going to, but anyway, which would confirm psychoanalytic theory about using one's transference to understand the clinical material, though we don't have to work in the transference, but we can understand. And I think the notion of expectancies, when you feel puzzled as a practitioner in the room, hey, what's going on here? That's when you have to look for trauma. Okay? Done.